If you guys can hear me, let me know in the chat so I can make sure all this is working. Should be able, I'm a couple minutes early, so we'll wait and give it a second. See if people start rolling in. Hey Josh, will you let me know if you can hear me all right? Perfect. It's getting there, man. It's getting there. It's my COVID beard. So I can see your comments, which are good. Can you hear me? Check, check. Hello, hello. Awesome, good. We'll give it just a minute here and then we'll get started. This class is going to be a introduction to pole fighting when it comes for ditch line fighting, and even in battle games. So we'll give that just a minute here and we'll jump to it. Looks like we got a few of you in here. Awesome. Appreciate you guys coming and hanging out. I know it's kind of a random time on a Thursday, but glad to do it. We've got some dummies set up that we'll use here in the background because we're not allowed to meet in person. At least a minute delay on the comments. All right, noted. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and jump in. Hey guys, my name is Godric. And today we're going to be going through line fighting with a pole and some of the basics for that. Talk a little bit about the different stances you need, when to do what, some of the basic stuff like that. Give you the caveat to start this off. I am not a warlord, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I just love fighting polearm, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And especially line fighting, ditch fighting is my game. And so just gonna kind of go through some of those basics here, and got my list. Let me get around on the other side of the table here and we'll get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the difference between line fighting with a polearm and like tournament fighting with a polearm, because they are pretty different. Most of the time when you get to tournament fights, you see longer and longer poles, maybe like 10, 12 foot. And people generally will go for the first stab, or they'll do like a feint into a stab, and then that's a tournament pole fighting. And then they'll rush up sometimes and they'll choke up real close and get into this like weird thing that doesn't really happen on the field very often. That pole fighting is very different from most line fighting, at least the stuff that I've been in. So the way is that they're different. In tournament fighting, your goal is to get kills. My goal in a line is not necessarily to get kills. It is to use my polearm to disrupt my opponents and set up my allies to get the kills. And so in tournament fighting, you're a lot of stabs, a lot of swivels, feints into stabs, and you can still do that in the line. But your mentality changes, or should change, when you're fighting with a polearm in the line versus tournament fighting. So I'm going to go through just kind of the basics. This is my combination pole. It's not quite a speed pole. It's not quite a war pole. It's a good middle ground. You'll hear different people say different things about the length, the ideal length that you should have for a pole. This one is a little bit taller than what most people would recommend for me. This is an 8-foot pole. That's kind of my minimum, is 8. I like that length when it comes to poles because I like being able to stab far down the line. And so there, we'll get into just a couple of basic stances and grips and why you need to be able to know them and rotate between them. So I'm not going to go into, here's how I hold mine. I guess we'll just start with that. I go thumbs out, pointing towards each other. I go with my dominant hand generally in the back on the pommel, with my left hand thumbs pointing together. There is some arguments out there to be holding it like this. You can do a bunch of different things with it. I don't really have a why one is better than the other. I think whatever works for you works. What is more important are the stances in which you're going to be using them. So the first one that I use most of the time is dominant hand, whether that is your right hand or your left hand. Put that back on your pommel and your left hand up in front. And so this is dominant hand back. This is going to be, the benefits of this are it's on their sword side quite a bit. We'll go into with the dummies here why this is useful. But thumbs about, 2 feet apart maybe, and you can slide up and down depending on your stabs and everything else. Let me, what we got here. Awesome. So that's the first one, and we'll get into some of that here in a little bit. The second stance that you need to get familiar with is your dominant hand in the front. I'm right-handed, so up here, again, I go thumbs together. You can do this if you want. This is just more comfortable for me. This changes up your angles, and it changes your pivot points. So that's the second one. And then the third one, which is my favorite, is Harpoon. And so that's where you take your right hand, you throw it up here, and then you're going to be doing a lot of stabs and a lot of downward thrusts. And I'll show that here in a minute. And we'll show where each of those come into play and why you need them. What I would do to start with, if you're just picking up a pole, practice with your dominant hand on the pommel for a while. Don't necessarily worry about switching too much. Get used to not hitting people in the face and then switch to other stuff. That's a big thing with these in our game. Pole arms hurt. So if you're hitting people in the head, you're doing something wrong if you're doing it consistently. But let's jump to the dummies and go from there. So I've got 2 lines kind of set up here. I've got my allies. These are roughly at 45 degrees, which is where shieldmen would be. Then I've got 3 bad guys across the line from me. A little bit closer than they really would be, but not too bad. Actually, when I'm standing back there, can you guys still hear me? Will you let me know in chat just to make sure? I don't want to talk for 20 minutes and then it not work at all. So could you guys hear me from back there? Maybe. We'll just go with it. So the first one, where to stand most of the time, you're going to want to be in between 2 shieldmen. Very, very rarely do you want to be off on your own on either one of the ends. Most of the time, I like to line up in between 2 shieldmen, people in front of you. One of the first things for me when I'm fighting in lines, my main target is not the person in front of me. If I'm throwing shots at the person in front of me with a pole, it's mainly to distract people or to tie this person up, which is what you'll do a lot, just kind of these like little quick chops just to keep them on their toes. My goal, what I'm keeping an eye out for, especially if I'm main hand back, are going to be someone the next person or even 2 down the line. Because their focus generally is going to be on the person directly in front of them. And so if you're here and then they take an opening, you can stab and get someone down the line, even 2 down the line if you really want to. So always try and stay even with your boardman. You can step out if you really need to, but it's dangerous. So generally I try to stay with my boardman and then keep it, I'm stabbing here and here if I'm going dominant hand backwards. So the perks of your dominant hand being back is, for me at least, right-handed. A lot of my shots are coming from this direction, so the pivot point is here. And so what that allows you to do, the benefit of that, most people in our game are right-handed fighters, so your shots are going to be coming in on their sword, which is really nice because you can knock it out of the way. You can, bump it. You can actually get them to drop it. And so your shots here are coming onto the sword side, on the people in front of you, and then especially the people over here, right? So that is one of the benefits of having your hand back. One of the other benefits is it allows you to stab quite easily going this way, just because that's where your natural weight is going to go. When you switch, your pivot point becomes the other side. So your shots are then coming in from this direction instead of over here. That can be useful, but a lot of times it doesn't do as much because you're hitting board at that point. You're hitting their shield instead of hitting their person or their sword. The good part about this for me is you can do what's called rowing, which you can generate a lot, at least I can, generate a lot more power coming from this direction and really not bump them back a little bit. The power generation coming from this side is a lot easier for me. And I also have a little bit more control if I'm gonna murder chop to go for shoulder with my back hand, because my right hand is in the front, I can read it a little bit better. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do there. See if I have any questions so far. Cool. And so those are the two main ones. And the goal for me most of the time is to pick the one. If I'm going against right-handed fighters, I'm going to go my right hand back. So that way I can get in the way of their sword. If I'm going against left-handed fighters, I'm going to swap and go in, because my goal is to keep my polearm in between their stick and myself. And so I want to be, if they're lefties, be throwing over here to their sword. If they're righties, want to be on this side, throwing to their sword there. So we'll come back over here. One of my favorite, like I said, is going to be Harpoon. The goal of, some of the benefits of Harpoon fighting, when you keep it it's further out there, which gives you a little bit more defense. And your goal with this is going to be a lot of legs, a lot of knees, a lot of bottom of the shields, and it is a disrupting shot. And so you're able to put a lot of power into these shots without much effort on your part. And so your goal, when you're sitting here safely behind your boardman, if you're going Harpoon, you're just throwing these little stabs. Some of them are going to hit, some of them aren't. The goal isn't necessarily always to kill them. Your goal is to occupy them so your boardman can kill them. So, for instance, if I have a boardman here and they have a punch shield and I Harpoon stab on the outside of that punch shield, they're going to rotate out and my boardman can go in. And so you're kind of just poking and prodding with this, right? Even over here you can do that. And your goal is just to annoy them enough, and then once they're not paying attention, really put some power behind one of those stabs, and it will kind of knock them out of the way. One of the other benefits of Harpoon is if you stab and they rush you, you can really quickly go up into a shoulder press. And what that's going to do, that's going to allow you to put weight down on them, which most of the time people aren't used to. So if you stab and it misses and they rush you, and then you can get back behind your shieldman and back out of the way. You can also do the same thing on this side and put your pole on their stick and pin it against them and just push down onto the board as you're retreating. So I really like Harpoon fighting because of the disruption. It is a lot of fun for me when I hit someone's shield and they move, and then my ally here can go in and kill them. And so that's one of my favorite ways to fight is the Harpoon fighting. Let me look at the chat here. Best advice for sword and board users partnering with a skilled pole. We'll get there, Josh. That's going to be more towards the end, is going to be what we expect from our boardmen. So we'll get there. Something to consider, right? Most people in our game are right-handed. So when you step out and you go over here, you want to make sure that you're not entangling the boardmen on either side of you, right? I might see an opening 2 guys down over here, and if I stab over here, I might get a kill, right? But if I am doing this, I have now cut this guy off from completely going this direction. And then, if these guys are smart, they rush and push the pole back, and now I'm caught up, and they're caught up, right? So when you're doing your stuff, you want to make sure that you're keeping your pole open and not in front of your allies. Same thing if you're coming over here, if you are back over this way, right? If you're trying to really get some power into a row, and you're trying to really get some oomph into it, you see, I don't know if you can see it from here, but I am now completely blocking the lane for my partner to be able to get that power, and that's not good either. So you want to make sure that you are, most of the time, keeping your pole in between your allies, or in between the enemies and yourself, while also making sure you're not blocking your allies. And you can still stab, right? I can stab here, I can even stab over here, and this guy can still go, but you don't want to be like here, right? You don't want to be so far extended, or if they rush you, you're here, because then you can't do anything other than spin out. But if you're here, your boardman with his stick can't really do much either. So your goal is to throw shots that don't get in the way of your allies there. This is particularly important when you're fighting Harpoon, because if I'm stabbing here, I need to be able to keep my pole in a defensive stance if they rush me, right? So if I stab and I miss and they rush, they have to go through my pole before they can get to me. If I'm over here, right, I'm done, I'm dead. Right? Same thing, if I'm way extended over here, I'm dead here. So with pole, you want to make sure, or with Harpoon, you want to make sure that you're leaving your allies open to be able to do what they need to do. When to switch in between these, right? This is probably the biggest question, right? Is how do I know which one to use? I go use it based on the person I'm fighting. If they are right-handed, I will either be in Harpoon or I will be right-hand back. And the reason for that is my shots are coming in on their sword, which is what I want. I don't particularly want it to be coming in from their board side, because that doesn't really do a whole lot, unless in specific instances. So if they're right-handed, I'm going to be right-hand back, throwing shots to their sword hip, to their sword leg. If they're left-handed, I'm going to put my not dominant hand, so that way my shots are coming in on their sword as well. Okay? I almost always will naturally start in Harpoon though, and then I will only switch off of Harpoon if they rush me or something, right? If I stab, right, they rush, I have to very quickly be able to switch and throw shots in, if that makes sense. Let me check chat again. What we got? Cool. So, normally, the shots that you want to be looking at for line fighting are going to be a lot of stabs, right? Those are always good. You can go, again, focus on the person to the left and the right of you, not the person in front of you. Stabs are great. Any shot to their sword is great, whether it's here or here. You can, especially if you're doing Harpoon, go for legs. I don't really like going for legs that often, but in a line fight, it's all right. And then in Harpoon, in specific, you're looking for stabs on the edge of their shield, on the board edge, to try and disrupt their balance. If you hit them right smack square in the center of the shield, it's not going to do much. But even on a strap shield, if you hit them in the corner or the round on the edge, it might flop them open a little bit. So especially in Harpoon, you're going to be poking and prodding and throwing shots pretty regularly, even if you don't mean for them to kill or even wound, just because it's going to disrupt them. Especially if they have a punch shield, you're hitting that shield all day. Trying to think of what else. What do you do when you get rushed? Because that happens a lot. It doesn't happen as much in line fighting. It happens when a ditch breaks down and your teammates all die and you're the last one left. But most of the time, if you stab, you're doing something. My goal is, if I have a line still left, do something to get behind the line and reset. If I'm out here, right, you can swap into something like that, right? So just a big motion. I don't like doing that often, but it scares people, which gives you a second to jump back behind the line. If you stab and you're out in the open, right, you just and pull it back. You can also, if you're harpooning, drop it and be able to defend as you back up. Your goal is to just get back in behind your line and let your boardmen do the work. Because if I stab here, right, and I'm here and this guy rushes to kill me, if this guy's paying attention, I'm okay. Because if I'm here, right, I'm occupying this guy has to now come through my pole, but then my ally should be able to get him there also. Just look at my notes real quick. All right, so I'll just reiterate this here again. When I'm fighting in lines, my goal is not to get kills. My goal is to disrupt, leg, arm, knock them in the shield so they are off balance so my allies can get the kills. I'm not trying to get the kills very often. Where to be, we covered that. Who should you be attacking, we covered that. So, if you are a boardman and you're walking up with someone with a pole, what should you be looking for? Generally, boardmen, you want to make sure that the pole is in between two of you if you can help it. That is generally the best. Your goal as a board is to wait for the opportunities that the pole user opens to you, right? So you can kind of throw your stuff if you want to. If you see an opening, you can rush, and your pole man should be able to follow. But if you have someone who's really good on pole, you are kind of just waiting, and then once they stab, right, and that shield gets open, you rush. If they get in front of you, right, when they get rushed, help them and let them kind of back up. Because a good pole man on the line is, like I said, trying to disrupt to give you opportunities. So what you need to be looking for as a boardman is look for those opportunities. When they hit someone in the leg, in that transition as they're dropping, rush them, hit them. If they hit them in the side of the board and it spins them open, rush them, hit them. If they stab someone, this is a big one too. If the pole arm goes in front of you and stabs someone, that is a hole created in the ditch line, run the hole. So mainly what you should be looking for if you are fighting with someone that is good with pole arm and you're the shield, whenever they give you an opportunity, jump on it. And jump on it as fast as you can, and they will follow you up if they know what they're doing. There we go. Looks like we're back. Sorry for that, guys. Wi-Fi trouble. So what I was saying was if you're a boardman, try and make sure that the pole arm is in between two of you if you can. Be in a defensive stance, and you can throw you're just. Should be all right. So when they give you the opening, when they're doing their stabs, when they give the opening and knock the shield out of the way, when they pin the sword, that's something as a poleman you should always be looking for. If I'm right hand going against a right-handed fighter and I'm coming down and I can keep my pole on their sword, right? If they're I guess it's like this, and you can grab your pole and keep hitting them here, they're going to try and guard this shoulder, right? Because they have to. And so if you can just keep hitting it or hit it and then just put a lot of pressure down on it and keep it there. Boardmen, if you see someone who, if they're doing one of these things, flinching because their sword's getting hit a whole lot, rush them, go hit them. So we got a comment. Should you be scared to throw high shots? That's a good question, Alex. I don't like throwing high shots because I don't like hitting people in the face. And I know we all signed waivers. I know it's part of the game. Everyone gets hit in the face. I personally try not to throw those unless I'm getting rushed or I have to. But that is just because I am not quite good enough to always hit the shoulder slot. And then even if I am good enough to hit the shoulder slot, if they're rushing, who knows what can happen. If I'm throwing, and what he means by high shots, so most of my shots come from hip or like onto shoulder or stabs. What he means by high shots are if someone is across the line and you come up here, right? So you're talking 45-degree shots down. If you're on this side, you can go for border shots, right? If you're fighting Harpoon and someone, a high shot looks like, which is, I like doing that, but my shots with high shots generally are on the weapon or on the board itself. I don't like throwing high shots because I'm afraid I'm going to hit people in the face. The only exception to that for me is when people rush me. If a boardman in particular is getting in your face, I don't feel as bad throwing those. They're asking for it by coming in that range. But as far as like an opening on the line, I don't throw high shots that often. You can, and there's nothing wrong with it. My skill level is just not to the point where I'm comfortable opening up with, murder chops and whatnot, if that makes sense. Trying to think of anything else. If you're getting rushed, one of the things I like doing, a good hard stab, whether it's on the board or to body, will stop most rushes. Even if you hit a board really hard, that will oftentimes be enough to get them to their momentum is stopped and they'll think about it again. So I've had instances playing on Kingdom Fields where full armored warriors are running in who are significantly better fighters than me, and I know it, and my boardmen have died, and they're rushing me, and a solid stab to the shield or to the stomach makes them think twice before doing it again. And so I prefer those type of shots than I do going up, if that makes sense. See if I forgot anything. So we went over the difference between war poles and speed poles a little bit. We went over the difference between tourney fighting and line fighting and some of the differences there. We went over dominant hand back, which is generally if you're right-handed, you're going to be going against other right-handers because it puts your pole in the way of their sword and you. We talked about dominant hand forward, which you switch to if they are left-handed, because again, your goal is to keep your pole in between you and them. Or if you're trying to row and get power shots and disrupt, you can switch to that as well. And then we talked about harpoon stance, which is where you come up top with your right hand still on the pommel. Those are a lot of stabs. Those are a lot of sweeping shots. That's the one I like fighting with the most. I think that's the most fun. Talked about switching in between them. And so it's I generally start, like I said, in harpoon, and then if I need to, I'll switch to right hand back to try and get away. What do we got here? Do you use intimidation as a tool while using a pole, and do you recommend it? Absolutely, yes. One of the biggest tools that you have as a pole fighter is that everyone is afraid of it. And so I oftentimes won't throw murder chops, but I'll let you in on a secret. I fake murder chops all the time. And you guys now know it, but a lot of people don't know that you're not going to throw it, right? So I'll start off a whole lot way up here. And I won't actually throw it down. Most of the time I come down and try and get a hip or something like that. But if I get someone, it's especially a jumpy fighter who's thinking about running the pole. So if I line up, right, and I'm in harpoon and I'm getting ready and there's someone who's sitting here jumping up and down, getting ready to go, they're thinking they're going to be bad and they're going to run right up. The second say you do this, right? I generally keep it at 45, so even if I have to come down, I'm going to go on the shoulder, and that's sword shoulder. But yeah, definitely throw it straight up, and then if you can come down, and a loud pole smack on a shield goes a long way. When you stab a shield and someone goes, oh, like that goes a long way. Definitely, especially if you have a war pole, right? Like this isn't a war pole, but if you get one of like the 4-inch giant ones, right? And some kid is acting like they're going to run the pole, you go way up here real quick. It is an intimidating thing, and I think it is definitely a tool, and it's one that I try to use as often as I can. It's a tool in the toolbox. Use it. Let's see. We talked about how it is not your job as the poleman to get kills on the line. It is your job to set up the other fighters to get kills. At least that's how I fight. Some people would disagree. We talked about where to be in the line. We also talked about who you should be attacking. People down the line, not the person in front of you. We talked about what to do when you get rushed. That is my... that is my basic rundown of pole fighting for a line. A lot of it is just positioning, stay behind your boards, stab to the left, stab to the right a whole lot, and then just practice that over and over again. I wanted to have more people and kind of run through some stuff with moving parts and whatnot, but COVID won't let us do that, so you got our dummies here instead. But I'll stay on for just a little bit longer. If anybody has any questions about any of this, we'll feel free, throw them in the chat, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability here. I'm not sure if we're giving out credits for this. I think we are. I don't know if there's a forum or whatnot. I'm sure our monarch, Arthur, will be able to, I almost called him Sir Arthur. Arthur will post some stuff in here or come in afterwards and see who is here and who's not, because I'm pretty sure we can give credits out for stuff like this. So if you were here and got anything out of this, go ahead and make sure you sign in there so you can get your credit. Finishing up here, so again, I'll give it a little bit longer, throw some questions in if you have any. Looks like we went for about half an hour. That's not too bad. Alrighty. Well, thanks guys for being here. I appreciate it. If you have any questions on this stuff, feel free, let me know. Whenever we get back out on the field, if you want help, ask. I'm not one to walk up and just give you tips, because I'm not one who receives help that way. But I love teaching, and I love helping people with that. So if you get out there and you just want help with any of the pole stuff, pull me aside and ask. I'd love to go through and kind of show you some of this stuff of what we're talking about, how to transition and what you should be looking for in openings. And hopefully we'll be able to play again here pretty soon, and we can put some of this back in, put this into play back at the park. So appreciate you guys. Have a good night. Peace, friends.